Hello friend, John Dalton here, Further Emergence podcast, where we explore consciousness, love and the mystery. And in this episode, I have a question about faith and trust. And then we go into trauma, being lost, the past, love, shadow work, moving lightly, peace and grief. In response to the question I posted on Instagram, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your spiritual life at the moment? Someone responded, following through in faith on God's plan for my life and trust. So I asked the person to elaborate and they said, I've been asking, I know He, with the capital H, wants much more for me. As I begin to live out from the nudges I feel propelled, yet I have not yet found my brave for the big thing that will make the most impact for what God has in store. They are big shifts and difficult ones, the boulders. Well, this is an interesting perspective, and it's a very different perspective to mine, meaning this person's relationship with God is very different to my relationship with God. Yet it doesn't really make any difference because the essence of what this person is finding challenging is exactly the same as the essence of what I find challenging. Like this person, from what they've written, their relationship with God is very personal. God is a man, by the sounds of it, with the capital H, so it's a he, and it's a separate thing from that person, meaning it's somebody, it's a entity, or it's something outside the person, separate from them, and it has plans for the person, and there's this challenge with the person of whether they can hear the plan, or if it sounds like they have heard the plan, but are they brave enough to follow on the plan and the challenges that ensues. And also this person is asking about faith and trust. So my experience of God is not personal. I don't have a sense of a personal kind of God, the sort of old man God up in heaven who knows every hair on my head. All that sort of, I suppose, is biblical. I was raised as a Catholic, so that will be the sort of thing that was ingrained into me. My experience of God is more of a knowledge of a very big, vast, impersonal thing. And while in some ways it feels separate to me, it also feels part of me. It's that Rumi thing that I quote a lot of, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the whole ocean contained in a drop. And it's like I recognize my very limited perspective on what, for want of a better word, I call God, and the movement of God. I also know I am that at the same time, which is a kind of a paradox that I'm aware of. But the challenge is the same, because for me it's about being attuned to the movement of the bigger thing. Like I often think of it in terms of like a big body. Like I am a little cell in a big, huge, vast body. Much like, a fingernail cell or an eyeball cell is one of the billions of cells in my physical body. And it's like, you could say the whole body is contained in the cell, and the cell is part of the whole body. And similarly, like what I am moved to do is, and I moved to do it because of love. Like I love this thing. I don't know why I love it. I just do. And somewhere I know it loves me. Not personally, not like knowing every hair on my head kind of thing, but it's a field for me. So I am trying to be the best fingernail cell or the best eyeball cell I can be because I love it. And because it's very satisfying. It's the most satisfying thing I can do. So for me, it's a process of being in tune, or doing my best to be in tune with the bigger movement of this big, beautiful thing that I'm part of, which is very similar. The essence of that challenge is very similar to what this person is talking about. I know He wants much more for me. For me, that would be a sense of what I know of myself on the inside being reflected outside, either in my environment or in me, in my actions, or I have a sense of what I am. And I have that in the same way that like a sapling would have a sense of its oak tree-ness. It's a, that it has in it a big oak tree. It's kind of that kind of feeling. And that feeling of needing bravery. It's not easy to be in tune with it sometimes because, let's say you're in the middle of an argument and you have the perfect response that's going to just crush the other person's, their argument, and shut them up and win, but it's not loving. It's not true on the inside, or I know it's not true on the inside. So I don't say it. That requires a lot of bravery and courage to let it go, Or I know that fear is not real. I know that fear is not a real thing. Even though I can feel it and my whole body can be feeling it and I can feel the hairs in the back of my neck standing up and I can be sweating, I still can know that it's not a real thing. And I can move forward knowing it's not a real thing, even though I'm terrified, which is another paradox. And in the process of feeling the movement, the bigger movement, getting a sense of there's a big movement coming and knowing that's going to disrupt everything, it's going to change everything, and being okay with it and allowing it to happen and not try to hang on to things and not try to hang on to people, places, money, little me, the me I know myself, not try to hang on to who I think I am. That requires bravery as well. So it's a great question because it's possible, like, if the spiritual life calls to you, if you've got that in you, if consciousness calls to you, if God, to use this person's language, calls to you, not everybody hears it, because it's very easy to be covered by your own unconsciousness and not hear it. So it never bothers me like what shape it takes. I could be talking to somebody who's a devout Hindu or a devout Muslim or a devout Christian. Unconsciousness is kind of the same, Unconsciousness can get into all of those things and you can hear that, and you can hear unconsciousness in people who are atheists and they're devout atheists. Unconsciousness in them is the same as anyone else. But the love of that big something, the other, the profound, the sacred, the divine, whatever words, doesn't really matter. The words don't matter because they don't describe it anyway. You can hear that. You can hear that in anybody. And if you can let go of needing for the person to be speaking your language and instead listen for the energy behind the words, then you share so much with the other person. So this person, they've got a very different perspective. They relate to what they call God in a very different way to what my experience is, but we share very similar things. So we can talk and we can have a conversation and communication can happen. And that's a beautiful thing. If you want to write to me, it's john@furtheremergence.com. Whether you want to just write to me and tell me how well everything's going, how terrible everything's going, if you have a question, if you want to hear my perspective on anything, fire away, john@furtheremergence.com. This week's recommendation is slightly unusual, but this is a movie recommendation. It's for a movie called Angel Heart. It was made in 1987, and it's got Mickey Rourke in it and Robert De Niro. And it is described as a psychological horror film. And I think that's probably correct. It is gory. Not a lot, but enough to be there. But in spite of that, it made an impression. I can't tell you too much about the plot because it's one of those movies where you can't really know about it. It's set in the 50s. It starts off as a kind of a detective story. Mickey Rourke is hired by Robert De Niro. Why it made an impression on me and why I recommend it to you, even in spite of the horror stuff, is it is about, for me, it very much is about unconsciousness becoming conscious of your unconsciousness, and the shock that can be, how shocking that can be in your system. And I've often refer back to this movie in my head of like, oh yeah, it's one of those Angel Heart moments, So yeah, I normally horror movies for their own sake, I'm not interested at all. But this one I think is worth it. So I recommend that one to you. Angel Heart, Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro. Have you signed up for my friendly notes? I send out friendly notes every Sunday. The little funny little bar thing I was using at the bottom of the website wasn't working. Somebody very kindly pointed it out to me. I think I have fixed it, but if it disappears or it doesn't work, it's the link to the to sign up for the friendly notes. Just send me an email and I'll include you. The meditation training is going very well. It's in its second week now, about to go into, well, we're in the middle of the second week right now. It's going very well. It's very nice second time round. 2 sessions, morning and evening, so all the different people from the different time zones can get to it. So that's going great. And I highly recommend it to you. Meditation is like the cornerstone. I've also got dealing with the psychic world training, which some people have said to me, oh no, I didn't do that one, it's too scary, it's too spooky, and I'm not interested in that stuff. So I suggest you read it about a bit more. It's actually how to avoid all of that stuff. Meaning in meditation, you will generally go through it. You have to go through the psychic world. So it's how to go through it without getting distracted by it. So yeah, recommend that one to you as well. And then the other training I have is a craniopsychotherapy masterclass. Good probably for most therapists, but definitely the focus is on craniopsychotherapists. Now, let's have a look at some of the memes on this week's Further Emergence Instagram feed. I didn't write this one, but it's very good. It says, "You are not the darkness you endured. You are the light that refused to surrender." That's beautiful, isn't it? Because that's the thing about abuse. Like I've mentioned before, I was abused when I was 3. And I can totally relate to that, because that feeling of darkness and getting through it and feeling like in some way you've become tainted by that darkness. You've been discolored or made impure or flawed by that darkness. That feeling is strong. And for this perspective shift to kind of go, you're not the darkness you endured. You're the light that refused to surrender. And I know in my own experience, sometimes that light felt like a little candle in a lot of darkness, a very flickering, vulnerable candle that felt like it could be blown out at any time. But still, that little light remained. And that's the thing to focus on. And that's why this is beautiful. I didn't write this next one, and it took me a couple of goes to get it. And I really liked that. It says, "I am lost. I've gone to look for myself. If I should return before I get back, please ask me to wait." I read that. I was like, what? I am lost. I've gone to look for myself. What? If I should return before I get back, please ask me to wait. I thought it's a beautiful description in some ways of dealing with unconsciousness and dealing with the spiritual life. Of this feeling of I'm lost, I've gone to look for myself. Because when you're covered by your unconsciousness, there is a feeling of being lost, of like, who am I? Or this is not who I am. I'm not sure who I am, but this is not it. And then this feeling of going to, well, I better go and find out who I am. And then this thing of, if I should return before I get back, please ask me to wait. And for me, that means it's like, if I think I've found myself before I've actually found myself, or if my mind finds myself, or if my unconsciousness finds myself, I suppose it's like a little prayer. It's like, please help me to wait until I actually return. So yeah, I just thought that's a lot packed into a little meme. That was very good. Didn't write the next one, but it's very good. It's just this woman, it's like 2 cartoons. One, this lady is carrying a big box, and it says, "Yesterday is heavy," and then in the next picture she's sitting on top of the box, and it says, "Put it down." And it's just a beautiful little reminder of we do tend to carry the past with us on our back, and our mind, in its attempt to recapitulate, which there's value to recapitulation. That's part of the Toltec tradition, the Mexican shamanism of recapitulation, of going over things consciously, not letting things go over you, because I know, like if your mind is like mine, you'll be in the middle of something and then suddenly my mind will remind me of some embarrassing thing I did or some cringeworthy thing I did years ago, and it'll give me a jolt and like, oh my God, and I'll relive it all again. That's a different thing. To recapitulation is when when that happens, like often when that happens, I will consciously go into it and go through it, and the idea of going back in time to the time and going, if I knew then what I know now, or if I traveled back with everything that I know now back to that point, would I make the same decision? Would I behave in the same way? What would I do differently? And then follow that line forward, follow that, that particular timeline forward. Very valuable thing to do. I've had great insights by doing that, because generally what my mind will do is it will prompt me with something that has the feeling of a regret, and then I'll consciously go back and recapitulate that moment and relive that moment with everything I know now, and then follow that consequential timeline forward, meaning the timeline that branches with the consequences of the different decision, the different action, and follow it along forward. And what I have found often I arrive very close to where I am already. Meaning, you have to be honest, and you can't be rose-tinted, and you can't, imagine things. Like I was explaining this to somebody the other day, and they were saying, that means if I can just imagine that my husband was my child. I was like, no, that's that's just imagination. That's a different thing. It's like going back to the point where you have a regret, reliving it, everything around it, every single little detail that you can remember about it, and then moving forward on with a different decision maybe, and then knowing all the people and how they would react to that, knowing everything, how that would progress forward. What starts off feeling of like, oh, relief, I can make a different decision, it can be different. I often find I end up very close to where I would be now in the same way. So I hadn't planned on that, but you could say that's a life hack. Recapitulation. It's the conscious going back over the past. Instead of it just happening to you consciously going back over it and making different decisions and following that timeline forward, and see what you discover about yourself and about the people that you think would be different. I didn't write the next one. I love putting it up though. It just says love louder. White letters on a red background. And I don't totally know what it means, but I kind of get it. And it's like a call to let yourself love more. Because I think generally we have our foot on the brake when it comes to love. We get a bit cynical, we get a bit beaten up, we shut down, we want to be safe, we want a safe life. We just want to rest most of the time. But this is the call of your heart to love louder, to let yourself love louder. It's like a rallying cry. I really like when I put it up, and I like seeing it. I did write this one, the next one. I've had this image for ages. I don't know where I found it, and if you are the owner, please let me know and I will credit you. But it's just this picture of this very black kind of furry creature with red eyes and long nails and two horns sitting at a kitchen table. And I just found it amusing. I thought it was a great image, but I didn't really have anything to say with it. But then it came to me during the week, and it just says, sit down with your shadow today and you'll thank yourself tomorrow. And it's this idea of facing your shadow. And your shadow is your unconsciousness, which sounds great and lovely, but often when you really get into your unconsciousness, it gets very uncomfortable, and there's a tendency to not want to feel it. But the more you can feel it, and the more you can go into your shadow or allow yourself to feel what's really going on underneath things, the less you project onto others. It is an act of kindness, so the kinder you are to yourself, the kinder you can be to other people. Like a little example of that would be realizing, like I was talking about last week, that everything that we do is fundamentally for our own self-interest. Every wonderful, lovely, loving thing, you can trace it back to you're getting something out of it. And if you deny that and go, no, it's all in the service of other people, that's denying your shadow. Your shadow bit is, I kind of like it. I like the way it makes me feel. Like I like giving people presents, but I'm very conscious of the fact that I like giving people presents because I like the way it makes me feel. And I acknowledge that. I've got no got no qualms. I'm not like, oh, I'm such a generous person and or anything like that. It's like, no, I'm doing it for me. I just like the way I feel. And I particularly like seeing the person opening the gift. So, I generally will try and be around when they're opening the gift. But even if they're not, even if I send someone a gift, just the knowledge of it and that they will enjoy it, I like that feeling. I like the way that makes me feel. Now, if I was in denial of that and going, oh no, I just like to be generous, I'm just a generous soul, that'd be denying my shadow, for example. And how that gets twisted then is if I give someone a gift, let's say I send someone a gift and they don't reply saying how much they enjoyed it, then I kind of start to feel resentful because I've repressed my shadow and I'm denying that I'm doing it for me and I want my reward. I want to know that they enjoyed it, or I wanted some little taste of the pleasure they got out of the gift, So that's just a little example of your shadow, but it's the way it works. And the more you can embrace it, the more you'll thank yourself. That's what that's about. I didn't write this one, but it's very good. It says, love is not, I will give this to you if you do this for me. And then it says, love is, I will give this to you so that you may shine. And that was written by young Pueblo. And it's very good and very subtle. And often when we think we're being loving, which I suppose is a carry on from the last one about our shadow, there is this subtle agenda. I will give this to you. I will give my love to you if you do this for me. And usually, like particularly in a close relationship, we have a shopping list of things the other person's supposed to do for us. You're supposed to heal all my childhood trauma, take care of me, love me unconditionally, and so on and so forth. Instead of what this person is saying, love actually is, I will give this to you so that you can shine. And I much prefer the second, and because it makes me feel better. And I know the difference. I know the difference of when I have an agenda. And it's always very sensitive. It's very complicated. It's a bit touchy. It's easily offended. Oh my God. When the person's not doing the things you want to them, it can be excruciatingly painful when you've got that agenda. Yet, through years of clearing that sort of stuff out and feeling the difference of when I just let love come through me because I want the best for that person. I don't have my only agenda is I like the feeling of when love comes through me just purely and simply. That's so beautiful and so satisfying. So my agenda, my shadow in that is I like that feeling. But I don't have any agenda. I don't have any cloying. I want anything back from the person, or I don't even want to see them shining. I just, it's like a light leaving me. I don't need to see it hit the destination or illuminate anything. I just enjoy the feeling of it leaving me. The next one I didn't write. Aldous Huxley did. It's a regular on the podcast. It's a great one. It gets a lot of response, and it's always appropriate. Doesn't matter what's going on. You can always relate back to this. It says, it's dark because you're trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel lightly even though you feel deeply. Just lightly let things happen and lightly cope with them. So throw away your baggage and go forward. There are quicksands all about you, sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self-pity and despair. That's why you must walk so lightly. Lightly, my darling. So beautiful. So just, it's so helpful to remember this in life because it is so easy to get sucked down. And we have it now in stereo. The amplification of fear is huge through our modern technology. And there are plenty of things that, are of concern. But fear, responding to them with fear is not helpful. But seeing them clear-eyed, definitely. But not with fear, not with despair. Nothing comes out of that. Fear and despair, as I say, fear doesn't exist anyway. It exists, but it's not a real thing. And despair, similar. You can feel them, but eventually the solutions don't come out of fear and despair. They come after you've let them go and you're broken, and there's a space for inspiration to come through, for the mystery to kind of fill in the cracks a bit. So this idea of treading lightly, even though the stakes are high, tread lightly. It's beautiful. Didn't write the next one. It's great though. It's just a signpost. It says, there's so much peace in knowing that you will not miss out on what's meant for you. Which kind of creates the idea of predestiny and all that kind of thing. It's not really. I don't see it as that. It's more this feeling of when you look back on your life and you see what was apparently serendipity at work. I met this person, then this thing led to another, and it seems like it was all planned, okay? Now, whether you believe that you planned it, you created it, or some other divine purpose, it doesn't really matter. It's just a feeling of like, wow, I could never have organized that, yet it worked out really well. And similarly, like if you really want something and it's not coming, it's just not coming along. Like this is, happens a lot in the manifestation circles. Like, oh, why isn't my manifestation happening? It's a nice kind of feeling to kind of go, well, your job really is just to be clear on what you want, clear on your desires. You can't make it happen. That's why they talk about in manifestation about don't worry about the how. Once you're clear on what you want, that's all you have to do. Because, as I say, when you think back, you could know how those wonderful things happen. So you kind of know you can't make this stuff happen. And this idea that, what's meant for you, as my mother used to say, what's meant for you won't pass you. There's something about that takes the pressure off. Because one thing that does cramp the flow of manifestation is expectation, or that pressure, or getting in the way, interfering, like trying to figure out the how of it and getting to micromanaging the whole process. So this is just nice for taking the pressure off that. I did write this one. It's kind of one of my more poetic ones. It says, it comes in waves. If you run, it will keep pace with you. If you hide, it'll find you. If you distract yourself, it will wait. Instead, breathe. Breathe steady, breathe slow, breathe through. It comes in waves and it will pass. And this is particularly relevant to grief, because grief comes in waves. The peaks and the troughs get further away with time, but they still come. And you can be in the middle of something, maybe the supermarket, looking at some tomatoes, and then for some reason the tomatoes trigger you, and suddenly you are either sobbing or you want to sob. You're just hit with this intense feeling of grief for whatever it is. A loved one, a relationship, a business, a child, doesn't matter. It's the same. And remembering this thing of breathe, that it will pass. You just breathe steady, breathe slow. Don't resist it. You can't get away from this stuff. It's a common and very understandable misidentification or confusion between how to deal with external pain or physical pain and how to deal with emotional pain. If you stick your hand in the proverbial fire, of course you're going to pull it out. You're going to get yourself away from the pain. That makes perfect sense in physical pain. It doesn't make any sense for internal or emotional pain, because you can't get away from it. It would be like sticking your hand in the emotional fire and then trying to pull your hand out, and the fire follows you, chases you down the road. You just cannot escape it. You can cover it temporarily with booze, alcohol, sex, shopping, gardening, knitting, you name it. You can distract yourself, but it's always temporary. And the worst thing is the feeling of it gets bigger the more you try and get away from it. So if you can face it as much as you can, I know sometimes that can feel overwhelming, but face it as much as you can. Breathe. It does pass. And generally when you face it, it intensifies for a little while, but it's only minutes, 5 or 6, 10 minutes. Then it starts to ease off because you faced it. It diminishes in some way. So if you're going through a hard time, I hope that particular one is of help to you. Breathe steady, breathe slow, breathe through. It comes in waves and it'll pass. All right, that's all I've got for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you have good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.